Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special Victober video. I am joined by such a lovely person I have met through the internet, and that is my friend Jess, and she has an awesome bookstagram called Dickens and Docs. So thank you, Jess, for joining me.
I'm so excited to be here. Yeah, playing it cool, but I'm very happy.
Yes, so we had a lot of fun during your Cozy Things chat that you did with me. But then I thought, why don't we just do even more kind of focused on Victorian literature and Victober? And yeah, it will just be a good time. So I guess, can you think back and remember how you stumbled on Victorian literature? Was it a signed reading, or did you kind of explore for yourself?
Yes, I was thinking about this, and it's actually a really happy memory for me. So my mom, she hadn't finished her bachelor's degree when I was young. And so when I was about, I think I was probably 10 or 11, she had gone back to school and was working on it. And she was getting it in English literature or just in English. And she was taking a class. I don't know if it was a Dickens class or it must have been some kind of Victorian literature kind of class, because she read Jane Eyre and then a whole bunch of Dickens stuff. And anyway, I remember her reading, I think it was Barnaby Rudge, and just talking to me about it. And then at some point she read Jane Eyre and showed us the old Timothy Dalton version. Have you ever seen that one?
I have not yet.
Very 80s staged, kind of like the inside and the outside are different, but really, really good. And I remember watching that with her and hearing her talking about those books. And I was terrified of Jane Eyre, and yet I really wanted to read it and understand what was actually happening. And I think that was my first being exposed to it. And so I read Jane Eyre. I think I want to say I was in third grade when I started it, which is ridiculously young. I'm sure I missed most everything. I remember being really proud of myself that I'd read it like so young. I'm sure, I don't even know what I remembered other than I'd read it. And I loved it. It's still my favorite of all of the. But anyway, and just talking with my mom about literature like that was really special to me. She's very passionate about it too. So.
Oh, that is so cool. So I'm sure she knows about your Bookstagram account.
Yes, she's an awesome cheerleader for me. She's great.
Oh, that is wonderful. Yeah, that's a really cool way to come into it, to see somebody that you respect and admire kind of falling in love with this topic and area of information and wanting to experience it that way.
Yeah, and she was so supportive. I mean, we always did like the library book things every summer. And I remember her showing me, like, finally I graduated from like a little kid section of the library. She showed me where the Dickens section was. And I remember going there every time I went to the library, just straight to it. Like, what's the next one I'm going to read? And these little pocket size, probably Everyman's edition or something. Anyway, I read my way through those all the way through middle school and high school. And she was really awesome to just like give me the next recommendation.
Wow. So you moved on from Jane Eyre to what? What was your next Victorian book?
Probably was Dickens something. I want to say maybe Great Expectations. And I think the reason I was able to understand both of those is because we watched the adaptations a lot. So it helped to even know what was going on. It's a little hard to dive in.
Yes. And I really love that about adaptations and retellings being out there. So with the boys, it's E. Nesbit's Beautiful Stories from Shakespeare.
I love that book.
Yes. And there's so much that happens in Shakespeare plays. It can be really confusing. And so I love this, this way to get them to learn it. And then also, I'm really hoping to get a copy of, this is so frustrating. I cannot remember the name of it, but I will put it in the description. It's some retellings from Spenser's The Fairy Queen.
Ooh, I would like that. Yeah, put it in.
Yes, because even, I read closely, following all the text when I did finally read The Fairy Queen, but names are mentioned so rarely in it. At one point, someone will enter a scene, but then you have all of these different moving parts. And so it can be confusing to kind of figure out who exactly is doing what. But when they're older, actually, I'm really hoping for us to read The Fairy Queen together. So that's why just any way to make older literature and art seem more approachable is wonderful. So I think that's a great way and to get to know it. And so you think you were maybe around 10 years old when you started reading Dickens?
I have to ask my mom. She'd remember, but I feel like I remember saying as I got older, like, I was in third grade when I read it. So what would I have been?
Yes.
Around there?
Yes.
Right.
Wow.
Anyway, I don't know.
Wild.
I was a nerdy child. And
yes.
Honestly, okay, so I actually have, I don't know if I told you this before, but I have clubfoot, and
No.
but both my feet were clubbed when I was born. And so I had a lot of surgeries and had kind of the older school method done so that it was like cast for several years. So I remember my mom saying that since there was nothing else I could really do, I was just sitting there in these casts. She taught me to read really young because I was bored.
Oh.
And so I think that's why. I think it was just like, I've always loved sitting and reading. I mean, we all do on Bookstagram anyway, but I think that's especially why, because I just couldn't do a whole lot of the athletic stuff the other kids could do. And running I can't run still. And so that was my thing.
I feel like that sounds like a very Victorian childhood, honestly.
Right? Couldn't be more little tiny Jess instead of tiny Tim.
Like when you were convalescing.
Yes, there we go. Invalid on my couch, just laying there.
Although, thank goodness your mother let you read novels, because you know
Yes.
how sometimes when you're reading older books, novels are scandalous.
Yes.
So yes, thank goodness for novels. And that's why I think the Victorian literature is so appealing to me, because it was really this renaissance for the novel. You and I both love Jane Austen, but the way kind of the intimacy that you have with the characters is at a different level in Victorian literature than it is earlier novels. And so there's such a sweet spot to me, where they have this beautiful balance with kind of descriptive, beautiful writing, and then gripping plot, but also you're still getting to know the characters within these stories.
It's true. And you're getting inside of their minds. I mean, I do think Jane Austen does some of that really well, but you get even more into their minds and their motivations, and all the techniques that writers today try to use to make their stories good, the Victorians kind of perfected, I think.
They did, yes. As you pointed out, Jane Austen, she made things come further along. Like I think free and direct discourse is what people say, where you're getting to know kind of for the first time what the characters are actually thinking inside their head, instead of just trying to gather it. And then the Victorians are like, I see that, and I will
improve it.
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. Enjoyable.
So I guess you've talked about Jane Eyre is your favorite Victorian novel of all time, and it is way, 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 way up there for me. And so to you, what is it that makes it such a special novel and kind of endlessly rereadable?
Yes, because it is one that I've read probably maybe more than any other Victorian novel. I think, that's a good question. I think, for one, the uniqueness of the plot, and now it's not so unique. It's, the same kind of stories have been retold a lot, but at the time, there was really nothing like it. I think it was a little shocking to a lot of people, not as much as Wuthering Heights, maybe, but just a little different from the norm. And I think it's Jane that I really love the most, because she's so true to herself, even though she's been through really hard things. She sticks to her guns on the things that matter the most to her, even when it means sacrificing everything. And plus you have all the elements that are wonderful. Like, you've got the romance and some of the most beautiful, romantic language in all of literature. I love their relationship. And then you also have the mystery and adventure and what's going on upstairs. You don't know who's in the attic and all that kind of thing. That's really exciting. Plot twists, all those kinds of things. And just a tiny bit of supernatural to make it, a little bit interesting. So yeah, I love it. I don't know why. I've revisited it before and thought maybe it won't still be my favorite, but then it always is. So
yes, it's I accept and receive all the criticism people have about it. I think Rochester is the hardest pill to swallow.
A lot of people don't always like him, and I get that too.
Yes,
totally get it.
I'll just say, without actually saying, fortune teller. Okay, that. And I love how in those film adaptations, they just are like, no, we're just not going to do that. We're going to tweak it so it's less cringeworthy. So even with all that, though, it's just such a beautiful novel. And I think it is the character of Jane, the title character, that makes it so what it is. And she, just how she has these strong convictions, and she will not back down on them. And she counts the cost of what it means to really live by those principles. And
I love it. She doesn't let her hardships and her trials that she faces drag her down at all. She just keeps going.
Yes. And it's interesting too to think about kind of how class and financial independence, you can see in that book, they don't fix all your problems. You know, Rochester has the financial independence and also her terrible, terrible cousins. They have it. And she goes back and sees them as adults. They're miserable people.
Yeah.
So I love that, you know, then when maybe things turn around a bit for her, that she is free. She doesn't, it's not enslaving her.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And I love her openness to change and trying new things too. I just like in that era, Victorian women were not that brave. You know what I mean? They were very much confined to their social situation and setting. And she was brave to just, in the first place, reach out with an advertisement to become a governess. And then when she shifts gears and changes her position, she just does it. So it's really great. I love it so much.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And have you listened to the Juliet Stevenson audiobook?
I love her so much. It's almost hard to go back after listening to her. There are a few audiobook readers that I'm like, I think I might need to listen and not read it because they're just that good.
Yes. Now Spotify has started doing like releasing different audiobooks.
Nice.
I think as podcasts. So I've never tried their Jane Eyre, but I am curious. How do they compare to Juliet Stevenson?
Yeah, it would be hard to top her. She is so great. I'm listening to her reading Little Dorrit right now. Yeah, she's phenomenal.
See, I should try that because this is a good segue into Dickens. When I read Little Dorrit for the first time, I did it on an audiobook, and the reader did the most infuriating voice for Amy Dorrit's father.
Oh,
and he's a complicated character.
He's hard to deal with anyway. It would be
yes, he's hard to deal with. Exactly. So it was like he was doubly frustrating anytime he was in a scene. So that's actually one that I'm like, I wonder if the narrator kind of hindered my enjoyment of that more.
Yeah, it really makes a difference. I listened to Martin Chuzzlewit, and there was some guy, Frederick something on Audible, and wow, he had this, do you know what I'm talking about? He had this like monotone voice for himself, and it drove me crazy. So I actually just went and found the LibriVox version, and it was much better.
That's crazy.
There's some good LibriVox ones for free that are really nice, but
yes. Yeah, I actually just enjoyed listening to The Belton Estate.
I want to read that one after saying you read it. That sounds so good.
It's such a sheer delight. I do think you should go in knowing, speaking of frustrating characters, Clara, the main character, she can be kind of frustrating.
Okay.
But I think since I thought she was still deserving of a happy ending, I was able to kind of like hang tight and be like, okay, this is frustrating about her, but I
can get through.
Yes, I can get through. So I guess what I would be interested to hear from you, what is it? So Dickens is your favorite author. You know, Jane Eyre, you have said, is your favorite Victorian novel, but Dickens is your favorite Victorian author. And what is it about his writing to you that makes it classic and it just keeps it feeling fresh? And obviously you're rereading Little Dorrit.
Yeah. Okay, so I feel a little bit guilty to say this, but so I made my account Dickens and Docs about 4 or 5 years ago, and I really do always love Dickens. He has that special place in my heart of being one of my earliest loves, and I still love him and I still read him all the time. But I don't know if I can say he's my only favorite now. You know what I mean? Because he, like Trollope, is right up there. They might be twins, and I love George Eliot. I love Gaskell. It's kind of like they're all just in this conglomerate of wonderful authors. But Dickens, I do keep reading. I'm actually reading, I probably told you this before, but I'm doing Dickens in slow motion with some friends. Sabine from Sabine's Literary World has had this running for, I think we're in our 4th year. Can't remember. Anyway, we started with the very beginning with Pickwick Papers, and we worked our way through. And I love Dickens because plots are always amazing. He always has a great web of characters that, especially in his later works, which are my favorites. The earlier ones I sort of hit and miss with. I like them, but I don't love them all. I don't want to reread all of them as much, but the later ones I love, and it's because he'll throw out all these different characters, sort of like a giant soap opera or something, and then they eventually all interact with each other or influence each other, and by the end things are resolved and they're all these surprise revealed, like, oh, this person was so and so's father or whatever, and then he works it all out at the end, and usually the villain gets what he deserves, and things end up happy and stuff, which I love my happy endings. So
Yes, he is really good at tying up endings with a nice little bow.
yes, and which sometimes feels a little like contrived to people. I would say that I love him for his delivery of a kind of a theatrical story. I feel like I'm reading a movie when I read his books.
Yes.
When I read Trollope, I feel like I'm reading real life of somebody's life, and I want to know what's going to happen next. And it feels more probably authentic. But I love them both for different things. They're all so great.
They really are apples and oranges. It's different things. And also then how you said it feels like you're reading a movie. You know, the Dickens are so theatrical, then his translate onto screen so well.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do really well. And his characters, I think that's part of why they translate well, is because they are so caricatured. You know exactly who they are. Even just a picture of one of his characters, and you can name who they are most of the time. So yeah, he's kind of amazing with that. I think characters, I guess that would be probably the biggest thing. Plot and characters are what I really love Dickens for, because he has the most quirky people, and yet you can see a little bit of yourself in all of them. But you feel like, well, I'm not that bad as the bad guy, but I can see.
That's my my budgeting skills. I feel a bit like Dora from David Copperfield, but I'm like,
right,
that's bad.
Me too. Me too.
As I say to my husband, I'm like, I know I buy a lot of books, but if you knew how many books I could buy.
Right, exactly. Yes, I very much relate to, the older I get, the more I relate to Dora. I'm like, oh, poor lady. It was rough. Yes. And I think another thing I really like about Dickens is how easy he is to listen to with audiobooks. If you have a good reader, he's one that is just really fun because the characters are so quirky. They always have their fun little catchphrases that they say. Even before you know who it is in the room that's come in, you can hear them say something like, oh, that's this character. So that's really fun.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm currently actually rereading Bleak House.
Oh, nice.
Yes. Yeah. So there are several ladies that are hosting a read along on YouTube. And the one character who, it's so funny, I think it's Mr. Smallweed, who's always asking Judy to shake him up.
Oh, yes. I love him. I love to hate him, I guess I should say.
Yes. And then this is in Little Dorrit. And so I'm pretty sure it's in the book, but I've seen the miniseries so many times.
Yeah.
The aunt that was inherited, and she's always eating the crust off toast.
I haven't got very far yet, and it's been a while since I've watched the adaptation.
So the woman that Arthur used to be, maybe they were engaged or they were.
Oh, Flora.
Yes. So yes, Flora, who's a widow, it's her husband's aunt.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So I haven't gotten to Flora yet. I'm getting there.
Okay. You'll have to confirm later whether she is in fact eating all the crust off toast.
Okay. And then I will let you know when I get to the toast part or not. I will let you know.
Yes.
Yeah, it's been a while. And I think that's what I love about it, is like I can remember a general plot. And even if I watch the film adaptations, but then I read the book and I'm just reminded of how beautifully he tells the story and how he uses like nature as a character a lot, or I don't know, big events. He loves fog. He loves like the grime of the city, and you just feel like you're right there when he's talking about those kinds of things. Or sometimes a storm or the railway. He uses that a lot in his stories.
Which that makes me think of, what is his short story that's so creepy involving a train? The Signalman.
Yes. Yeah.
That
he was in a railway accident later. I think it was later in his life. So I don't know if it was before or after he wrote that or wrote that into his stories. But that must have been such a big thing in all of these books in the Victorian era, with the railway coming in. I'm reading The Way We Live Now by Trollope. And it was the big new thing. It was like, what's new right now? I don't know. Like when smartphones came out or something, just something really big that changed your whole life.
Yes.
And they weave it into their stories in such fascinating ways. I love seeing how they were beginning to kind of acclimatize themselves to having the railroad as part of their lifestyle.
I feel like train travel was so different than any other technology that had come out. It was so much more than, more different to go from a carriage to a train than from a train to a car. Just the speeds at which people could travel. So that is something that I find really cool as this sort of link between this era and And then, I feel like I feel kind of as scared about AI probably as people did about trains then. And hopefully it all turns out okay in the end with AI. But people coping with kind of centralization and more connectedness than ever, and new technology, and how it affects our lives, and how it affects how we rest.
Faster pace of life, and more transient people who could, people had lived for hundreds of years in the same little villages in Jane Austen's time. And she did move and travel quite a bit, I think, for her era. But still, she was located in New Hampshire. That was kind of her central area. And then you have people now in the Victorian era where they are going all over the place, and travel is easy, and relocating your family is a lot easier. And then you have people who can kind of wander, and you get, I would think, more crime and stuff. I would kind of like to deep dive into that a little bit more and find out how it really influenced all of those things. But
well, there's a much more anonymous feel to living in the city than there is in the suburbs, which I guess the suburbs didn't quite exist then. But the city or the countryside. So that's, I feel like it's I'm thinking now about Sherlock Holmes, I was
thinking of that too.
There's the Hound of the Baskervilles, where he's called out to the city for something, called out to the countryside for something specific. A lot of the weird things, the Red-Headed League, it's in the city, and kind of where the more dastardly folk are hiding.
Exactly. And then it starts to bring that out to, the more rural areas. I don't know. I can see why it would be a difficult thing. Isn't it Cranford where the ladies are troubled about the railroad coming in? And I can understand that.
They're troubled about the railroad coming in addition to someone at some point robs the kind of the general store. I forget.
That's right. Yes.
And so then they're like, there's a crime wave in Cranford. And Mrs. Pole is literally sleeping with her silver underneath her.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I'm remembering all these great parts. I love it. That's so good.
And I imagine that was based on something that actually happened. Kind of, it's really sad how, a crime doesn't happen in a small town until it does. And there's this sort of, I don't know, there's this kind of general agreement between everyone, like we keep each other safe. And then something like that happens, and it really just makes you struggle with trusting the people that you were living around before that. So it's done in a very comical way in Cranford, but I very much understand the panic, before
totally.
You thought you were safe, and all of a sudden it's like the rug has been pulled out from underneath you.
Which I guess we can all kind of relate to with COVID and all the things and rioting and all that stuff that happened. It
was
a scary feeling, and sort of suddenly we can't go outside, and so I think it's fascinating to see what was difficult for people in different areas. And that's a big one. Change for good and bad.
It's fascinating and comforting. People have lived through.
They made it. We're here as a result of we've got through those times. So it is really interesting.
And so then I guess, could we talk about Trollope for a bit? So is Trollope, did you start reading him because of Bookstagram, or was it before that?
Kind of. So Trollope, I was way late to the game with Trollope. I read just The Warden when I was, it's probably like 10 years ago. And I think it was just an old copy of my mom had on her shelf, and I took it and read it, and I was not very excited about it. Like, this is kind of boring. And where is the action from Dickens? And where is the good dialogue from Jane Austen? So I just set it aside, because that was kind of my limited scope of literature at the time, And then it was Bookstagram. I know what it was. I found a really hideous copy of the Palliser series at my library. And so I just bought them all, because I'm like, okay, no, Anthony Trollope is Victorian. I'm going to get there at some point. And then I started reading Can You Forgive Her? And I really was starting to like it a lot. And then I had a friend on Bookstagram who's no longer participating. But she reached out and she's like, hey, there's a group of us that likes to read Trollope. And we just finished the Barchester. We're reading Palliser books. If you want to dive in, we're in the middle of that book. So I tried to catch up and started reading. And then I got hooked, and we read the whole series together. And I loved it so much. And then I was like, why was I not enamored with The Warden more? And so I started a read along a couple years later of the whole Barchester series and completely loved it. So great.
Oh,
Maybe even more than Palliser. I don't know. They're both good. But yeah, that's how, and then somehow just between those read-alongs and then we did read some more together after we're done with the read-along, just like, we don't want to be done with Trollope. Let's try another one. He has so many words, like, I can't remember how many, 40 something major novels. And now I'm at the point where I'm kind of just always reading one because he's so comforting. He's just so calming to my soul. I don't know why. I really love him.
Yes. Well, and I feel like his books, they just feel like far much less work than some other Victorian writing.
And yet they're intellectually stimulating because he uses bigger words and he uses like really interesting ideas that make you think, but it's not in a lofty way at all. I feel like he wants you to understand him and doesn't want to seem too academic. He's great.
Yes. Yeah, no, and I mean, for Pete's sake, he has that whole chapter in I don't know. It might be Dr. Thorne, the whole chapter on how there's the one guy who's a hobbledehoy.
Yes. Oh, I love that.
And all of his
just keep rehashing it.
Yes, all of his hobbledehoyness.
Yeah. Yeah. He makes new words up. Oh, he's so great. And I feel like he's just my kind of writer, because as I read or sometimes as I listen, I'll get distracted and I'll be thinking of other things and I'll miss stuff a little bit. And he always recaps constantly, but I don't think it's annoying. I've heard of people saying that they don't like that very much, that they feel like he's just repeating himself. But to me, it doesn't feel like repeating himself. It just seems like he gives you this great little part of the plot line. And then he's going to go over here and cover this part. And then he's going to come back to this and remind you of what's been happening here. It's sort of like an episode recap when you're about to start the next episode of the series, He's so good at that. Just a quick summary, and then you're sucked right back in, and you never know what's going to happen at the end of the story. You just don't know. It's not like a predictable, here's the guy, here's the girl, and then eventually they're going to get together. It's like, here are 7 different women and 10 different men, and most of them are kind of idiots, but some of them have redeeming qualities, and let's see how they all interact. It's so fun.
And so you said you're currently reading The Way We Live Now. And
yes, have you read that one yet?
I read it very early into my Victorian reading. And so I came out being like, I appreciate that book, but I didn't love it. And so I'm very excited. Yeah, it's a lot to take in, but I'm really excited to come back to it at some point. And so what are you thinking of it so far?
Oh my goodness, I love it. It took a little longer to get into because it is really hefty, and it is a lot about the railroad and investments and so much of The Way We Live Now, all about how things were changing in the Victorian era, which I find really fascinating. And as so many different characters will be talking about, like, well, that's how it used to be, but now this is how things are done. And it's I don't even know where it falls in his works, but it must be a later one a little bit, because a lot of social norms from the earlier Victorian era are kind of turned on their head in that book. And I'm loving it. I would recommend Anthony West's narration if you try to listen to it. He's so good. Do you know who he is?
You know what? Is it Timothy West?
Timothy West. What did I say? Did I say Anthony?
Isn't he the prince's father the king in Ever After?
Oh, yes, he is. I thought they totally is. Yes, and he's also he's Sir Lester Dedlock in Bleak House, if you've watched that adaptation. Oh. And his son is now that's why I'm getting him mixed up. I think his son is Anthony.
Oh, I know who you're talking about too.
Yeah, Sigmund in All Creatures Great and Small, if you've watched the series.
And also, I feel like the BBC Narnia, he was maybe Prince Caspian.
I think, oh wow, that's a blast from the past. I haven't thought of it in a long time. I'm gonna go look at that. That's so crazy. Yeah, Timothy West is he sounds like Trollope is reading the book too.
Oh,
just has
that's
sort
so
of
cool.
Nice old uncle kind of voice about him, and he does the voices so well, and he does this wonderful. So one of the main characters in that one is Melmotte, who's the railway tycoon kind of guy who you don't really know what nationality he is. I think he's a little bit of German, he's been all over these different countries, and his accent is just so good. In the film version, it's David Suchet, and he sounds kind of like that, sort of gruff. He's great.
Wow,
that might help you enjoy it more. It's a really good audiobook version.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I am excited to go back. I feel like my Victorian reading muscles have been strengthened.
You could probably handle it a lot better now.
Yes. Yeah, I feel I'll be more prepared. So I'm toying with rereading it this Victober. So in the future, I'll know whether I did choose it for Victober.
Yes. And it is so big. So no judgment if you don't get to it. It's really long.
Yes. So then that makes me think of, we haven't talked yet about Gaskell.
Oh,
and
I love her so much.
Yes, I know. There must have been something in the water at that point. So
amazing.
Speaking of characterization, I feel like Gaskell is also really good at that.
Yes. Only much more realistic characters than Dickens. I feel like he was wise to involve her in what he did and have her write for him, because I think she would have been a major competitor elsewhere. It was like he was just gathering in, okay, this is talent I don't want to have against me, so have her work for me. Yes, she is something. I really love how I feel like she's the person I want to be friends with in the next life. You know, like Dickens, I would like to meet and shake his hand and thank him for all that he did, and he's great. But I don't really love him as a person. Sometimes I'm kind of mad at him for who he was. And Trollope, I think, would be fun to talk to, but I feel like Gaskell is who I want to be my eternal friend for the rest of heaven. Yes. Beautiful soul, and such insight into humanity and into our relationships with each other on such a deeper, more beautiful level than I think any other Victorian author, really.
Yes. And I really, when I read some of her letters, and I loved her so much more after reading the letters. So I'm like,
I'm searching everywhere for those just because of you. I just want you to know I'm going to find them. Get a good copy.
Hope that you find them, because it's just fun to see kind of the gossip about contemporary authors of the day. Yes. And she talks about, which Dickens is it? I want to say possibly Martin Chuzzlewit, that she was in a stagecoach and the person next to her was reading it. And so she was trying to peer over his shoulder.
I love it.
And then he got off the stagecoach, and so it got cut off.
That's hilarious. Yes. Oh, that's so cute. I need to read that. That sounds wonderful.
Yes. So then I'm hoping to get a hold of sometime soon there's the further letters of Mrs. Gaskell. So the collection, I mean, it's right there.
Yes. Okay.
It's ginormous. But I think they were able to include everything. And then I think the further letters of Mrs. Gaskell is maybe a bit slimmer. And it's just some that they didn't end up including in the first one. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure what exactly is in it.
I've got to find both of those. That sounds just delightful. I really love her. I think her books are they are accessible, kind of like Anthony Trollope. I think there are similarities there. Mm-hmm. But she has a little different style, and it's definitely more, I feel like she has a little smaller circle. Trollope has a wide net of people usually in his stories.
That's a good point. Yes.
But I like that intimate. It feels more like just a group of friends, that you're getting to know really well.
Definitely.
And oh man, I love her books so much. And hers really hold up to rereading really well too.
They do.
It's great.
It's astonishing. And I think it's that she knew kind of just exactly what she wanted to do with each story. Yes. So they feel very intentional in the ways. Maybe the one exception might be the concluding chapter of North and South.
Yeah. Yes, actually, it's so funny because I've read North and South like 3 times, maybe 4. Mm-hmm. And I always forget what happens in the end because the movie version is so phenomenal. And the ending, that's just what sticks. And every time I get to the end, I'm like, wait a minute. How does this work out? I can't remember.
Yes. So it is really sweet. And it's probably closer to how a real couple, would finally tie things up and end up together. But it's just so romantic how they do it in the miniseries.
Oh my gosh. That is the best closing scene of any adaptation of anything ever.
Yes. Yeah. And then it's funny, then obviously Wives and Daughters doesn't have an ending scene because it was unfinished. So I love the ending scene.
Me too. Me too. Okay, both of those are actually probably the top 2 for me. I love both of them. Yeah. And both of those actual adaptations are just like the ones I recommend to people if they haven't seen a period drama yet. Start with one of those.
Yes.
Like one of the few I got my husband to actually like was North and South because the men did something. It drives him crazy when we watch Jane Austen films and he's like, these guys they go around all day doing nothing and they have to sit and drink tea. Like, what is up with that lifestyle? It drives him crazy.
That is, my husband has said that before too. And so he definitely appreciates the activeness and robustness
Mhm.
of Gaskell's men. Now, Mary Barton would make such a phenomenal miniseries.
Why haven't they done that?
I don't.
Who
There
do we
was
talk to?
there was like a 1930s, I think, film.
Oh, really? I haven't even. I'll have to look that up.
Yes, but I guess I don't have high hopes for it, so I've just never watched it.
It probably wouldn't be great. They
yeah.
always change the plot.
Yes. So the BBC, I mean, they had such great success with Cranford, Return to Cranford, North and South, and Wives and Daughters were all very well loved.
Why don't they do that? I think
I
we need to
don't know.
petition. Seriously, that was, oh man, I was on the edge of my seat through the end of Mary Barton. And
Yes.
all the whole, I mean, I don't want to give anything away if people haven't read it, but that is just such a good story.
Yes.
And very underrated. Probably, I think,
very.
her most underrated book that
Yeah.
you should really read.
Yes.
Although I loved Ruth too, but I don't know if I'd want to see, that one was a little bit more beautiful to read, be harder to watch.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, it's just a little too close to Tess.
Yes, exactly.
I know it's obviously not, the whole ending and resolution is very, very different, but
Yes.
just that whole dynamic. Now, I love Sylvia's Lovers, but it would be too sad for me to watch.
I actually haven't, I don't think I've read that one yet.
Yes.
I know, I need to.
Well, I can't tell you whether you're going to like it or not, because it seems to be very hit or miss for readers. I just love it wholeheartedly. Now, one thing I will say, it was very interesting then to hear from Charles Heathcote, who is from the north of England, and he read it and he thought that her kind of the way she wrote Northern English dialect was kind of insulting, a little bit
interesting,
maybe patronizing. I think that's what he said, or maybe he was talking about the narration of it. I'm not sure now, but I have to go back and see what he said on it. But I know that it was not, I was like, oh yes, he's from the north of England. This will be a big hit. And then it wasn't really.
It wasn't. Oh, that's too bad.
Yes. So I can't tell you whether you'll like it or not.
I'm excited to try it. Are parts of it in the Cranford miniseries, or am I thinking of a different one that she pulled?
No, I think My Lady Ludlow is.
That's the one. Okay.
And then The Moorland Cottage and Mr. Harrison's Confessions.
Okay, those are the ones I haven't read. I've read Cousin Phyllis or something like that.
Oh, I love Cousin Phyllis.
Yeah, I really like that one too. But I haven't gotten to the other ones, so those will be maybe this Victober.
Oh, that would
what
be
your prompts are.
a Cranford mashup.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Yes. All right, so then we have to talk about George Eliot, who I feel like kind of in the online book community, out of Victorian authors, she might be the least popular.
Yes. Oh, which is unfortunate, but she is, I think, probably the least successful. Maybe that's why.
Yes.
Because her books take more work and more mental effort and a little more going back and rereading, for me at least, or like a lot of rewinding when I'm listening to an audiobook.
Yes.
Oh, she is hard, but so rewarding when you get to the end of them. I just feel like you've had an experience when you've read her books.
And I feel like it's a bit with reading her books, you can't regress in kind of understanding how she writes. And so, I had to go through Middlemarch, Daniel Deronda, and then something magical happened with Adam Bede. And then it's when I went back to those other books, they didn't feel nearly as challenging as they did the first time around.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, there you have to hit that sweet spot. Certain, like my daughter hadn't read any of them, and then she read Silas Marner and loved it so much.
Oh wow.
And that was a later one for me, and I liked it, but I think my first one was it was Adam Bede, which is probably why I just liked her off the bat. Maybe that's just a good one to start with. Yeah, I loved Adam Bede. Yes, it is. And I really fell in love with that one. And then I read Middlemarch. And it's my top 5 of all time favorite books. And I love it so much. It's just so rich. And there's so many beautiful lines in there, and the characters' lives, you just feel very invested. It's like, I don't know how to put it into words, but I feel like hers is a little bit more of a deep intellectual experience. Whenever I read her books, I'm just like, I'm really immersing my whole brain. It's not like I can just sit and listen and enjoy the plot as I'm going on. It's like I'm thinking really hard about what's being said. And I think that is hard. A lot of people don't like that because it's not an escape. It's a little more work. Yes. So I totally get that. Yeah. But definitely rewarding. I think the best thing, so Middlemarch has a Juliet Stevenson. You probably already knew that, but That's when that was my first book I heard her read, and
wow.
loved it. So good. She does a great job on that one. And
she does.
And then Daniel Deronda, I read that one, but I'd watched the film adaptation first, and I think that really helped me know what was going on.
It's a very grandiose kind of plot.
It is, and kind of harder topics than some of the other ones I read up to that point.
Yes. I
feel like it deals with a lot of marital conflict in the, I don't know. Up to that point, I hadn't read much of that other than like the Dickens stuff. When that kind of thing happens, I feel like you're watching a cartoon version of it or something. It doesn't feel quite as hard and like hurt your soul kind of thing. So I think that's why Daniel Deronda was a little bit harder for me, but I still really loved it at the end. And then I have not read Romola. You've read that one, right?
Yes.
And worth it, right?
Very worth it. It is. I'd say it's more it's more intense.
Okay.
So not as harrowing as certain things in Adam Bede, but definitely more than Middlemarch. So Silas Marner is actually one that I haven't fallen in love with. And so that's one that I plan to come back to and just, I think, read it on my own, not do the pressure of hosting a read along or anything, just reading on my own. And so taking whatever pace I feel like with it, because I would love to fall in love with it, because I know that people that do love it really love it.
Yes. And I need to revisit it too, because when my daughter said she loved it so much, I was like, really, it was fine, but I wasn't super into it. But she read it kind of as a fairy tale. And she said that really helped her enjoy it. So I need to revisit it again too.
Yes.
Definitely another one. Yeah. It's interesting. I want to read, one thing I want to read is Anthony Trollope's biography, he was an autobiography, and he talks about Eliot. And I can't remember what he said, but I remember him saying something about just the loftiness of her writing or something. I had a daughter who read that. She had to read it in an autobiography for a school assignment, and she read Anthony Trollope's. And
yes.
Sorry, my daughter just knocked on the window.
That's fine.
Anyway, so that I think it's interesting how they view each other, all these authors that were publishing at the same time period. I would really like to read his, because he talks about so many of them. But anyway.
Yes.
George Eliot is an interesting one.
Yes.
So that makes me think of something I wanted to talk to you about. Because so many Victorian books are big, hefty tomes.
Yes.
And a lot of people get turned off by that just because of the fact that it is a big book. And yet we all read a lot. I think there's something really rewarding and wonderful about investing your time in something really big that covers either a big scope of time or just a lot of character development or something. But that's, I think, one of the things I love the most about the Victorian era, because it's not, there are page turners and some of them are really exciting, but a lot of them just take a little bit more time or give you time for introspection. And I think that's something that we need in this world today. We get so fast paced or feeling like we need to just check off the next book, but it's worth investing time to read a really long one if it's fascinating to you as you're reading,
Yes. Yeah, because many of the kind of more modern, shorter books, like I'll read Cozy Mysteries, which is great. There's nothing wrong with it, but I don't have as much fodder for conversation when I'm done with it. You kind of you finish it and then you're done. And Victorian novels, you finish it and they live with you.
Yes.
And I really, it's a very different reading experience. And I kind of feel we're so just inundated with quick information and instant gratification kind of interaction with our art. And so, I've said before in videos, you take a year to read Middlemarch. You don't have to rush through it. And I think you'll find you're surprised at how much more it stuck with you then. Well, now I would love it if we could talk about the author that I'm basically just going to low-key and very politely harass you to read her until you do. And that is Charlotte Mary Yonge.
Yes.
So I think that any friend of Louisa May Alcott will be a friend to Charlotte Mary Yonge. The very kind of warm, sentimental feeling that is in Louisa May Alcott's books is in Charlotte Mary Yonge's books. And also, it's quite remarkable that she features disability in, so now out of the 8 that I've read, I think disability has been in 5 of them.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yes. And what I love is that it's very kind of everyday that they're in there, and it's not this kind of unconscionable evil that has happened to them. It's kind of an inconvenience. And then we just kind of do life in a little bit different manner. And I like that accessibility is sometimes mentioned as being an issue, but it's also not a character flaw in the person with that. But much like George Eliot, and that I feel kind of a major portion of her plots is the refining of one's character. That is really there in Charlotte Mary Yonge's books. And so there's often, there's often a big moral dilemma that someone has to go through. And so I think it would feel a bit heavy-handed to me if that was all that was there. But then there's other things happening and coming into play. And like I said, the very warm, sentimental feel. And so many of the books, you are welcomed into this kind of parlor with the family where life is happening and they're having conversations. So have you seen the 2019 Little Women, the Greta Gerwig one?
Is that the one with Hermione?
Yeah.
Yes, I have not seen that yet. I need to.
Okay. Well, there's a really remarkable thing she does with conversations in that it's like a symphony. So when one character, finishes their sentence, there's another character immediately they're jumping in with their sentence, and it's just, that's how families talk,
Yeah.
And so I love that Charlotte Mary Yonge is able to carry these conversations that are real. It takes quite a bit of mental gymnastics, but she does it so well. And another thing I will say is that she doesn't go for the marriage plot. They're more family sagas. And so sometimes with the marriage plot, then it ends and I'm like, oh, but I want to see, what was their life like?
Yes.
And so I love that with many of her books, you see the couple after they are married.
Oh, interesting. I love that. That's wonderful. Yeah, because you need a little bit more just the time. Yeah. Okay, which ones are your favorites? You told me one last time we talked, and I got it on my Kindle and I started to read it, but I didn't have time before I went on my trip and stuff, so I just didn't.
Yes. So the Eyre of Redcliffe.
That was the one. Yeah, Eyre of Redcliffe.
It's the only one that I've reread, and so it is my favorite. But it could be that I go back eventually and reread some of the other ones, and they're my favorites too. But yeah, so the Eyre of Redcliffe is my favorite, but then very close seconds, and they're all tied for second, is Chantry House, The Three Brides, and Heart's Ease.
Is that one word? Heart's Ease?
Yes. Yeah, like the violet flower. I think another name for Heart's Ease. And that one of the main characters is named Violet, so it's kind of a pun.
Oh, got it. Okay, cool.
Yes.
Yeah, she sounds wonderful. I really need to read, and I really wanted to read her at the time, and then stuff just happened, and then the summer's been busy. So I'm hoping that I can read her this Victober. That she's one of my definite want to read this year.
It's going to happen. I can just tell it.
Hey, do you recommend, because it's a little harder to find, I think I looked for an audiobook version and couldn't find one that I had to, unless I purchased one, and I'm cheap. So do you recommend like physical copy over? How did you listen or read?
Yeah, so I haven't happened upon any decent audiobooks.
Okay.
It's a crime. And
that's the thing about these lesser known that are so good.
When you branch out, So I don't know of any audiobooks. Another one that actually could be a really fun read aloud for your girls. So maybe you'd feel like you could more make it happen if it was counting as a read aloud. Is Countess Kate.
Ooh, okay, that's by her too.
Yeah,
I've got to put these, just if you don't mind. I'm gonna
no, I do not mind. So Countess Kate also has this fabulous edition that was put out, I think in the 60s, and it's like a peachy pink with bright yellow letters. I found it on Etsy, and I've seen there are more readily available online. And Countess Kate is more novella length. It's closer to, I think it's just over 200 pages, and it's a children's story, and it's so fun and charming. And it's kind of like if Anne Shirley all of a sudden became a countess.
That sounds delightful.
Right? So Kate, she loves her little life, and then all of a sudden she gets this inheritance and she's a countess, and she has to be a proper young lady and wear the clothing that proper young ladies do and study the way they do and be more kind of demure in her manners and go live with two elderly aunts that she's never lived with before. And she just continues to get into scrapes.
My kids would love that. Well, I'll totally read that to my girls.
Yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun and a great kind of shared memory you can have together. So whatever your first Charlotte Mary Yonge that you end up reading, I hope that you love it. So now, if we could talk about Victober, and so Victober's first year would have been 2016.
Okay.
Do you know how many years into Victober you found
I
it?
was 2 years after that, because 2018 is when I started my account and found out about it that year. And which I have to say, side note, that you were a celebrity in my house, because I told my kids that I was dropping off to camp this morning that I had a Zoom chat with you with my friend who created Victober, and my son's like, wait, she created it? Like, she made it up? I'm like, yes. And we're friends. So
well, I can't quite take credit for creating it. Well, Katie, the idea was formed in Katie's mind, but I will say, the hugest cheerleader and promoter.
Yes, we'll take that. Yes. Anyway, so I've been doing it since then every year, and it was just like what I never knew I needed in October. It's so great. I love it.
It's just the most life-giving thing. Yes. It just feels so natural to celebrate Victorian literature, have a specific time to go all out with it, and then in addition to that it's in October.
Right. It couldn't be a better month. And like, I have a book club that I'm part of with a bunch of ladies from my church. Mm-hmm. And whatever we read in October, I just like bust through it ahead of time, because I'm not going to be reading it in October. We're going to read just Victober literature. That is it.
Yes.
Because it's just so nice to be completely immersed, and the feel of it depends on where you live, but I live in a place that has the fall leaves and the cooler air and all the things that just feel very autumnal and wonderful.
Yes. Yeah. And I feel that October is the new year for Victorian literature readers.
Yes. Yeah. Right. It kind of makes you rethink, like, okay, I want to read this for Victober, and then I'm going to carry on and read this author. Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And so do you have, aside from reading fabulous Victorian literature, do you have any kind of rituals or other things that make it more fun, or is just the reading exciting enough?
Let me think. I mean, probably just the reading is the biggest part for me. Mm-hmm. I don't have a lot of free time to do any. I mean, I love the idea of like sitting with scented candles and candlelight or whatever, but I don't really get a chance to do that kind of thing very often.
Yes.
But I definitely plan the heck out of it and think about every single prompt and what I can fit in, and can I do multiple things that fit in, and then finding all the right audiobooks and getting it all queued up and ready to go. And I do love to take a picture every year in the same spot if I can. I have a flaming bush that the first year it was perfectly fall, like the fall colors had changed. It was bright pink and really cool. And then it doesn't cooperate with me every year. Sometimes it's just a late fall. Come on. And I'm waiting for that bush to just go. And so sometimes you get a little bit of green and pink, but that's a dumb tradition, but I love having my picture.
I think that's a fabulous tradition. And it's very achievable.
Yes, I can do that. Exactly. Yes. Definitely. And I just love the whole feeling. I've always loved that time of year anyway, the sweater weather kind of feeling.
Yes.
So it just is one more wonderful layer. Oh, I do actually, I guess this is a tradition because I've done it 2 years in a row. I like to take my Victober pictures in a different location than I do, like all of them usually, because usually I have a lot of pictures on my docks because I'm down there all the time in the summer, or pictures of like from our house, we can look down at the lake. Just because my account Dickens and Docs, we have kind of like a lake theme going on. But with Victober, I like to take all my books in a backpack and go on this hike that's really close to my house, because it's just this kind of Gothic feeling to it. It's like, I mean, I live in a foresty place, but it's mostly lodgepole pines where the needles are up high and it's not super dense forest. It's beautiful. This place has all these different kinds of trees that grow there. I don't know why, just on a different shaded part of the hill. And so you have these little places where the trail just disappears off into the distance, and it looks just, I don't know, kind of haunting a little bit. So I try to take my pictures in that location, mostly just for Victober. That's kind of strange, but yeah, it's fun. I love doing it every year.
Yeah, no, that's great to have kind of routines and rituals within your Bookstagram. And then I just love kind of adding any kind of routine that will then make that thing nostalgic the next year.
Right. Exactly. So now it's going to be a thing now that I've said it out loud, because I guess this will be the third year I've done it. So yeah, that's what I do.
Now, I know you said your free time is limited, and so kind of any free time you have is devoted to reading fabulous Victorian literature. Do you end up watching any mini series or anything throughout the month, or that just happens later on?
I try to. I mean, it does happen kind of whenever we can fit it in. I have 5 daughters and 2 sons. The poor boys just get dragged into whatever the girls are doing. But my daughters love watching period dramas, so we usually. It seems like we've been able to fit something Victober in during that month. I think this year they want to watch Our Mutual Friend. Oh, it's been a while since they've seen that one, so we might be doing that one. And I have a few adaptations that I really love, but I'd like to try some new ones. If you have any suggestions of good ones you like.
Well, before I forget, I will get to that. I just wanted to say that last Victober I rewatched Little Dorrit. And I was just expecting to watch it by myself. But my boys were fascinated and they loved Darnier. They were like, he's so cool. I love any scene he's in. That's so funny. So I was not expecting that, but they were watching and enthusiastic with me. And so I'm like, all right, maybe pick another Dickens.
Dickens is good for the guys too. It seems like easier for my husband and my kids to relate to. Did they know that he's Andy Serkis, Gollum?
I think I told Peter that, but I don't know if he remembers it. What's actually, Peter hasn't seen any of the Lord of the Rings movies yet. We're so mean. We're making him read through Harry Potter first. And then we said, and then you'll be ready to read Lord of the Rings, because Lord of the Rings definitely takes more concentration than Harry Potter. So we're being really mean, and he has to read the books first, but
that's okay. That's not torture. That's great. Both series are great. So you can't go wrong there.
Yes.
But yes, I definitely hope to watch some more Victorian stuff.
So one that is not, you couldn't watch it with your girls, but if some magical free time ever happened for you, the new Amazon Prime Vanity Fair is
I have not seen that one.
Excellent. Hey. It's so good. So it's not even anything super spicy, but it's just there's a few things that it's like I wouldn't be comfortable with a kid there. Okay. I really love, there's an Acorn Media, and I think it's maybe 2008 adaptation of Nicholas Nickleby.
Yes. Is that the one? Okay, blonde Nicholas or dark hair?
Blonde.
The blonde one. Yeah, they're both so good. They both came out really close together.
Yeah, but it's not
it's not the same
like
one.
This kind of length blonde.
Oh, it's different. I haven't seen this. I'm writing.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. He's James Darcy. That's the actor's name.
Yes. Okay. I love that one. I like it better than the other one.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's so good. I really like that one. Dr. Thorne, that could be really fun to watch with your girls.
That they would love that. They would love that.
Really good.
These are good ideas.
And then let's see. Oh, there's a Amazon Prime adaptation of The Moonstone that is really excellent.
And that one my boys might like too, because mystery.
Yes. There is, I will say, there's at one point when someone is found tied up and they're like mostly naked. It's like a dude is tied up.
Okay, good to know.
I can't remember the character's name. Totally drew a blank.
That's okay.
That is it is a very fleeting thing. And there's a lot of opium use happening in there, but I feel like that could be a good conversation story.
I was going to say, that's what I feel like most of, anything like that, you can always just discuss, and there are reasons why we don't do that anymore.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. That sounds great. Oh, that's a good list. I hope to get to.
And then this is totally too scary, but I now every year, the evening, Victober Eve, as I've started calling it, I watched the Young Sherlock Holmes, which is completely not.
I've actually never watched that.
Jess, let me tell you. So it is directed by Chris Columbus, who directed the first, couple of Harry Potter, and it's got the kind of dark academia vibes, because it's when Holmes goes to the university and he meets a young Dr. Watson. for the first time.
Fun. Okay,
And
I need to watch that.
Yes, and they are kind of forced to investigate their first case. Now, it is made in the 1980s, so it's going to be kind of cheesy, and there are some really over-the-top cheesy special effects that happen. But
that's okay. If we're prepared for it, it'll be fine.
But I really love it.
Yeah, that sounds like fun. Okay, I'll totally do that. I think my boys wouldn't mind that so much either. And actually, I find that they like the shows. I have my younger son. We watched. It's a Trollope movie. I'm trying to remember the name of it because all of his book names are so funky.
He knew he was right.
Yes, it was that one. He knew he was right, and they were invested. They loved it, and I feel like that's a harder one of all of his stories to really get into, and they loved it.
But I remember actually I watched it when it aired, and now I want to rewatch it. And there's a lot of people talking to the camera, right?
Yes. Yeah, Bill, I don't know how to say his name. Bill Nighy.
Yes.
Anyway, and he turns and it's so brilliant, and it kind of captures Trollope's genius.
He does.
In the film. It's really well done.
It really is.
They love that one. So
so fun. All right, now before we close out, do you have kind of a book in your mind that you're like, if I get to the end of Victober and I did not read this, my Victober all will have been lost.
Be complete. Oh, let's see. I haven't sat down and pinned them all down yet this year.
Yeah, I think if we're recording this, it's the last day of July, so
right, I know,
understandable.
And it's been a busy summer, but I do want to get to the Charlotte Mary Yonge. I want to read that for sure. That will happen. I'm not too worried about that.
Awesome.
And I think the one that I'm hoping to get to is Romola.
Wow.
But we'll see, because it is so big. So it just kind of depends. I will kind of measure it out by whatever the prompts you guys end up doing. I mean, that they're important to me. I like following that and kind of having a theme. Yes. So
okay. I won't tell you what my prompt is. I've already decided on it, but Romola would fit for it.
Really? Okay. Yay, good. Well, then maybe that will be my one, because I wanted to read it last year and it didn't happen. So I think that's why I want to get it.
Oh, yeah. And there's a fabulous Nadia May audiobook of it.
Ooh, okay. I'll look for that. That might help me, because sometimes I do a little better with audiobooks if they're really hefty.
Yes, there are certain sections of the book that I think would be pretty challenging to follow on audio, but then there are some really action-packed chapters that I feel like you know your walks that you love to do with an audiobook. Yeah, I think it would be, you could totally process and track with it as you're walking. So I'd say it's not a multitasking audiobook, but if you're going on a walk and your thoughts are clear, I think it would be great for that.
Okay, that sounds perfect. I love that. And I don't mind going back and forth between physical copy and audio too, if it's worth it. So that's good to know that I could maybe do a little bit of shifting back and forth.
Yes.
That's probably the one. That and then Anthony Trollope's autobiography is something that I do want to try to get to this year.
Oh, how fun.
Because I wanted to wait till I finished all the Barsetshire novels, because he talks a lot about them, and I wanted to not have spoilers.
Yes.
So that will be really fun. My daughter completely loved it. She was 14 or 15 when she read it. And I was surprised she loved it, but she's like, he's so great, I need to read his books now. So
yes. Yeah, not to downplay your daughter's, intellect, but I'm like, if a 14-year-old can do it, like I can do it.
I can do that, sure. Exactly my thoughts. Yes. And then, I mean, I won't be too sad if I don't get to reread, but I would love to reread something, because there's so many great ones that I've loved over the years. So
yes. Well, and it's like if you hit several duds, it's so great to have something reliable.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes. So the reread I think I'm the most excited for, and I'm really hoping to do, is Dombey and Son.
Oh yeah. I love that one. That's a good one.
It's to me, David Copperfield is top notch. And I think Dombey and Son, I think after I reread it, it will be tied with David Copperfield.
Yeah. It's definitely one of my higher tiered ones of Dickens.
So good.
I love it. Great characters.
Yes. This has been the loveliest time. So thank you very much for being willing to join me for this.
Thank you for inviting me. I've loved every minute.
Oh, and have a lovely day, everyone. And I hope you are having a splendid Victober.